Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the rules you've lived by, the rules of money, power, and opportunity, no longer apply. The dollar isn't as strong as it used to be. The markets move in ways no one can explain. Nations that once seemed invincible now wobble under the weight of their own success. The world feels uncertain, unstable, unfamiliar. And yet, deep down, you sense that this isn't chaos, it's evolution. It's history repeating itself in a new disguise. For 50 years, I've watched the global machine turn, sometimes slowly, sometimes violently, but always in rhythm. I've seen booms and busts, wars and recoveries, revolutions of industry and revolutions of thought. I've seen people lose everything because they didn't understand the pattern, and I've seen ordinary people become extraordinary simply because they did. The truth is that what most people call a luke is just timing aligned with understanding. And understanding comes from seeing how cause and effect drive everything. You see, the world doesn't move randomly. It moves by rules. Economies rise for the same reason gardens bloom, because someone planted seeds, tended them, and let time do its work. Empires fall for the same reason forests burn, because growth creates decay, and decay clears the way for renewal. The pattern never changes, only the players do. When you learn to recognize that pattern, you stop reacting and start anticipating. You stop fearing the future and start shaping it. We are now living at one of those rare turning points when the old order is fading and a new one is being born. Power is shifting from west to east, from debt-driven consumption to innovation-driven productivity, from centralized control to decentralized intelligence. The world is reorganizing itself just as it has done many times before. And while that may sound terrifying, it's actually the greatest opportunity any of us will ever experience, if we can understand it. This is not a moment to panic. It's a moment to wake up, to see the mechanics beneath the noise fall. To learn how money, debt, innovation, and human behavior weave together to create the reality we live in. Because once you see how the world truly works, you gain something that no crash, no crisis, no government can take away: clarity. I've learned that history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes perfectly. Every generation faces its own version of the same test. Will you be crushed by change, or will you ride it? The people who thrive in times like these are not the ones who predict the future. They're the ones who prepare for it. They study how systems evolve, they stay balanced when others overreach, they adapt faster than fear can spread. That's what this is all about, not fear, but freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing how to navigate reality itself. Because the world order is changing, yes, but so can you. And if you learn the rhythm of history, if you live by principles that align with reality, you won't just survive what's coming, you'll help shape what comes next. I've spent my entire life trying to understand how the world really works. Not how I wished it would work, not how I was taught it should work, but how it actually behaves. The mechanics beneath the surface that drive economies, societies, and destinies. The more I looked, the more I saw repeating patterns: booms and busts, peace and conflict, prosperity and decline. It's as if history has a rhythm, and most people are too busy dancing to hear the beat. My journey and the principles I live by come from listening to that rhythm long enough to see where it's heading next. When I began as a young investor, I thought I could outthink the market with logic alone. I built models, read reports, stayed up nights crunching data. Then in 1982, I was certain the economy was about to collapse. I positioned myself, my company, my reputation for disaster. Instead, the greatest bull market of a generation began, and I lost everything I had built. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. Yet, it was also the most transformative. Pain plus reflection equals progress. That's not a slogan. It's a law of reality. Every failure contains a coded lesson if you're humble enough to decode it. That lesson led me to a truth that still guides everything I do. Everything happens because of cause and effect. When you understand cause and effect, the world stops being random. You begin to see why empires rise, why currencies fall, why some people thrive through chaos while others drown. The same cause and effect relationships that govern physics also govern economies. Debt behaves like gravity. Interest rates act like wind. Human nature is the constant. We are emotional, tribal, and driven by incentives, the same forces that built Rome and broke it. If you can understand these patterns and position yourself within them, you can navigate any storm. That's the foundation of both global strategy and personal freedom. To understand the future, you have to study the past, not through nostalgia, but through data. When I analyzed 500 years of history, I saw the same arc repeat. New world orders emerge when a country becomes productive, builds wealth, invests in education and innovation, and gains power. That success leads to confidence, then arrogance, then over-indebtedness, then decline. Another power rises and the cycle begins again. The Dutch, the British, the Americans all followed this path. And right now, as we speak, we are living at the intersection between the fading of one world order and the birth of another. This is not a time to panic. It's a time to prepare. The people who thrive during great transitions are those who think independently, who see patterns others miss, who make decisions based on timeless principles rather than temporary emotions. That's what I mean by financial freedom. It's not about having endless money. It's about building a mindset and system that can adapt to any environment. Freedom comes from understanding reality, not escaping it. Throughout history, the most powerful empires have all shared the same ingredients in their rise: strong leadership, education, innovation, and a sense of shared purpose. They also share the same ingredients in their fall: too much debt, widening wealth gaps, internal conflict, and a loss of productivity. When a nation spends more than it earns and prints more money to fill the gap, its currency weakens. When that happens long enough, people lose faith in the system. Then comes inflation, social unrest, and sometimes revolution. It has happened dozens of times. It's happening again. But here's the good news. Cycles mean renewal. Every decline creates the conditions for rebirth. Understanding these cycles lets you position yourself for the upswing even as others crumble. If you know how to read the signals, the future stops being a mystery. You start to recognize where opportunity hides inside crisis. One of the most important insights I ever discovered is that debt cycles behave like seasons. There's a spring, a period of credit expansion and optimism, a summer, when growth heats up and inflation builds, an autumn, when debts accumulate faster than incomes, and then winter, when those debts can't be paid back and the system resets through deleveraging or default. Most people experience these shifts as chaos. The wise see them as natural. If you plant the right seeds in winter, you harvest in spring. Right now, the world is transitioning from the late stage of one long-term debt cycle into the next. Governments have printed more money than ever in history. Interest rates have hit historic lows. The wealth gap has widened to levels last seen in the 1930s. These are not isolated facts. They are symptoms of a maturing empire. As internal conflict rises and external rivals gain strength, the balance of power shifts. We saw it when the Dutch guilder gave way to the British pound, and when the pound gave way to the US dollar. The question isn't if it happens again. The question is how we prepare for it. Understanding the mechanics of money is the foundation of protecting and growing wealth. Money is not wealth. It's a claim on wealth. Real wealth is productivity, the ability to create value that others want. When governments print money faster than productivity grows, they dilute that claim. The short-term relief feels good, but the long-term pain is inevitable. The lesson is simple. Don't store your life's energy in something that can be printed endlessly. Store it in assets that produce, compound, or appreciate with time. That's how you stay free when paper burns. Empires fail for the same reason individuals do. They forget what made them successful. Hard work becomes entitlement. Innovation turns into bureaucracy. Unity turns into division. People stop asking, "What can I contribute?" and start asking, "What can I get?" That's when decline begins. But decline isn't destiny. It's an opportunity for those who stay humble, stay curious, and keep learning. I often say, if you worry, you don't have to worry. If you don't worry, you need to worry. You need to worry. The people who survive changing world orders are those who worry productively. They use concern as fuel for preparation, not panic. They study history, diversify wisely, hold cash when things are overvalued, and invest when everyone else is afraid. They maintain balance. across asset classes, across geographies, across time horizons. Balance is the ultimate hedge against uncertainty. It's what keeps you safe while others swing from euphoria to despair. Every generation faces its version of change. My parents grew up during the Great Depression and World War II. My generation saw Vietnam's stagflation and the Cold War. Today, we face a digital revolution, a new economic order, and the rise of China as a global power. Each challenge feels unique, but the patterns are the same. Understanding those patterns gives you peace. It allows you to see chaos as choreography. The world may look like it's falling apart, but it's simply reorganizing itself. Financial freedom in a changing world order isn't about predicting the future perfectly. It's about being prepared for whatever the future brings. That means building a diversified portfolio of assets, not just stocks or bonds, but also real assets, currencies, and even skills. Yes, skills. Your ability to adapt, to think independently, to create value in new systems is the most important asset you will ever own. Markets crash, currencies fail, but skills compound forever. The most successful people I've met share one mindset: radical open-mindedness. They know they could be wrong. They actively seek out opposing views. They don't let ego block learning. The more uncertain the world becomes, the more valuable that humility is. In times of rapid change, arrogance is expensive. Curiosity is profitable. When you combine curiosity with principles grounded in history, you gain something rare: clarity. That clarity is what gives you confidence when others lose theirs. Imagine being able to watch a financial crisis unfold and know exactly what phase of the cycle it represents. Imagine seeing inflation rise and understanding why. Imagine knowing how governments are likely to respond and how markets will react in turn. That knowledge doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you unshakable. And in a world addicted to emotion, being unshakable is the greatest competitive advantage you can have. As I studied the rise and fall of empires, one question haunted me: can decline be prevented? The answer is complex. On a national level, it requires humility, innovation, education, and shared sacrifice. Qualities that are hard to maintain when wealth and comfort dull ambition. On a personal level, however, decline can always be prevented. You prevent it by living by principles that don't change when the world does: discipline, diversification, self-education, and above all, adaptability. The people who resist change break. The people who accept it bend and thrive. I believe the coming decades will bring both enormous challenges and extraordinary opportunities. Artificial intelligence, shifting power structures, climate transitions, and social realignments. These forces will reshape the global order. But beneath them, the same timeless truths will guide success. Be productive, be balanced, be humble, be kind. The principles that built fortunes in the past will build them again, only in new forms. Let me leave you with a simple framework, one I use to make sense of the world. Think of reality as a machine made of cause and effect relationships. Your job is to understand the machine, identify the levers you can control, and pull them wisely. If you do, life becomes a series of manageable problems rather than unpredictable chaos. When you encounter pain, don't run. Analyze. Ask what the cause was, what principle it violates, and what you'll do differently next time. This is how empires evolve, and it's how individuals grow rich in every sense of the word. When you see the world through that lens, fear fades. Because while you can't control the tides of history, you can learn to surf them. Empires rise, currencies fall, technologies disrupt, but the human spirit endures, especially the spirit that learns. Every generation that masters reality instead of denying it creates the next great renaissance. We're at the edge of one now. So as we step into this changing world order, don't ask, what's going to happen to me? Ask, how can I align myself with what's happening? Don't cling to the comfort of the familiar. Embrace the clarity of the inevitable. The greatest fortunes and the greatest freedoms have always been built by those who saw the world as it was, not as they wished it to be, and acted accordingly. The patterns are all around you. The principles are timeless. The power to thrive within change is in your hands. This is the beginning of understanding the great cycle and your role in it. If you zoom out far enough, Every nation looks like an organism. It's born, it grows, it matures, and eventually it declines or evolves into something new. The same laws that govern living systems govern societies because both are bound by cause and effect. What gives life to an empire is productivity, the ability of its people to create more value than they consume. What kills it is complacency. The Dutch learned this, the British learned. The Americans are learning it now. The lesson is timeless. Productivity is destiny. When I first began to study the long arc of history, I didn't set out to write about empires. I set out to understand how money worked. But the deeper I went, the more I saw that money is only a reflection of power, and power itself rests on education, innovation, and character. A country becomes rich because its people are learning, adapting, and producing. When they stop, the wealth begins to rot from the inside out, even while the surface still shines. You can see this same process in a business, a family, or a person. The pattern is fractal. If you plot the rise and fall of the world's reserve currencies over the last 500 years, the curves look almost identical. The Dutch guilder, the British pound, the American dollar, each followed the same path of ascent, dominance, and decline. In the beginning, there's thrift, innovation, discipline, then come expansion and optimism. Debt grows, luxury grows faster. Soon the habits that created strength become diluted by comfort. It's easy to spot the late stage of a cycle when people care more about distributing wealth than creating it. When reward becomes disconnected from contribution, the machine begins to grind. Yet these cycles aren't tragedies, they're transitions. Nature works through cycles of creation and destruction because that's how systems renew. A forest burns, and the soil becomes fertile for new growth. An empire overstretches, and its fall clears the way for a new balance of power. The wise investor, the wise citizen, the wise leader, all learn to see decline not as death but as transformation. Those who panic at endings miss the beginnings contained within them. When I talk about the changing world order, I'm not predicting apocalypse. I'm describing rotation of wealth, of influence, of opportunity. Every time the center of gravity shifts, those who cling to the old map get lost. Those who study the new terrain find freedom. The Dutch merchants once ruled the seas because they mastered ships and credit. The British mastered industry and trade routes. The Americans mastered technology and capital markets. The next great power will master data, energy, and coordination. The specifics change. The underlying rule remains. Whoever increases productivity the fastest becomes the new leader. Think about what that means for you personally. If nations rise through productivity, so do individuals. The single most important investment you can make is in your own capacity to produce value that others need. Skills are the personal version of industry. Discipline is your central bank. When you keep learning while others rest, when you save while others spend, when you build while others boast, you are mirroring the actions that lift civilizations. That is not theory, that's arithmetic. Compound improvement over time always beats occasional brilliance. One of the most powerful principles I ever learned is that reality rewards those who align with it. Reality doesn't care about your opinions, it cares about cause and effect. If you can see those causal relationships clearly and act accordingly, you gain leverage over uncertainty. That's true whether you're running a global fund or managing a household budget. The same thinking that predicts an empire's collapse can protect your savings. The same discipline that builds a nation's wealth can build yours. Let me illustrate. Imagine a country that borrows heavily to fund consumption. At first, everything feels wonderful. Credit flows, housing booms, confidence soars. But debt, unlike income, compounds negatively. Each borrowed dollar steals a little from the future. Eventually, the bills come due. Inflation rises, purchasing power falls, and the central bank prints more money to plug the gap. People blame politicians, markets, or foreigners, but the cause is simple arithmetic. You can't consume more than you produce forever. The same rule applies to you. Live beyond your means long enough and you enslave your future self. Live below your means and invest the difference and you buy freedom. History isn't just a mirror of nations, it's a manual for individuals. Another repeating pattern I found is the wealth gap. Every successful empire creates inequality as prosperity compounds unevenly. At first, that inequality fuels growth because the rich reinvest in innovation. But over time, the gap widens beyond what the social contract can bear. The poor resent the rich, fear the poor. Political polarization rises. Eventually, taxes increase, capital flees, and productivity falls. Then comes either reform or revolution. We saw it in France, in China, in Britain, in America in the 1930s. The cycle always ends the same way. Balance is restored through painful adjustment. Now the question for each of us is, how do we stay balanced while the world tilts? For me, balance begins with diversification. Never bet your future on a single outcome. Diversify across assets, across countries, across ideas. The world system is too complex for certainty. Instead of predicting, prepare. Instead of clinging to one story, hold multiple possibilities. That's how great investors survive regime changes. It's also how great nations endure. The United States rose because it diversified its strengths. It wasn't just military power, it was innovation, education, and openness to talent from everywhere. Those qualities created an adaptability unmatched in history. But even the most flexible system can ossify if people lose their hunger to learn. The moment ideology replaces curiosity, decline begins. You can see it in markets and in minds. Rigidity is the prelude to irrelevance. The principle is clear: evolve or die. That's not pessimism, that's biology. The species that survive are not the strongest but the most adaptable. The same applies to economies and individuals. The faster the world changes, the more valuable adaptability becomes. In the age of artificial intelligence and geopolitical reshuffling, the winners will be those who treat learning as a lifestyle, not a phase. Financial freedom comes from adaptability too. It's not about guessing where the market will go. It's about building systems that work regardless of where it goes. My all-weather philosophy grew from studying centuries of data. Every economic environment, rising growth, falling growth, rising inflation, falling inflation, creates winners and losers. You can't control which environment comes next, but you can own a portfolio that thrives across them all. The same concept applies beyond investing. Don't depend on one income stream, one skill, one market. Build layers of resilience. Freedom is not the absence of risk, it's the ability to handle risk gracefully. Another timeless truth is that humility is strength. Every empire that collapsed did so partly because it stopped listening. When feedback contradicts belief, denial sets in. That's fatal. I tell young investors, don't mistake being right for being smart. Being right once can make you overconfident. Being humbled teaches you to stay alive. The most successful civilizations institutionalized feedback. They created checks and balances, independent courts, free presses. Those mechanisms are simply large-scale versions of what each of us needs personally. Honest feedback loops. Without them, ignorance compounds faster than wealth. Now let's talk about the external forces, competitors, rivals, new powers. Every empire rises in the shadow of another. The Dutch challenged the Spanish, the British challenged the Dutch, America challenged Britain, and now China is challenging America. This isn't villainy, it's the rotation of advantage. When one country becomes the largest producer, creditor, and trader, its currency becomes the world's reserve. That status allows it to borrow cheaply, to project power, to influence culture. But reserve status also breeds complacency. The issuer prints more money, imports more goods, and slowly transfers its wealth abroad. Over time, the creditor becomes the debtor. The new producer becomes the new banker. The baton passes quietly until a crisis makes it obvious. Where are we now? Somewhere near the handoff. Somewhere near the handoff. The United States remains extraordinarily strong in innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital markets, but its debt burden and internal conflict are high. China is rising with immense productivity and cohesion, but faces its own challenges of debt and demographics. The global system is searching for a new equilibrium. You can't stop that process, but you can position yourself within it. That means thinking globally, saving in multiple currencies, understanding trade flows, and never assuming any one nation will dominate forever. History shows that even the mightiest must share the stage eventually. In these transitions, fear sells. Headlines scream collapse, decline, doom. But perspective sells better. To yourself, the world isn't ending, it's evolving. The same forces that scare people create opportunities for those who stay calm. When currencies weaken, assets tied to real productivity, land, commodities, businesses gain value. When inflation rises, debtors benefit. In those moments, societies stand on a knife's edge. Some rediscover unity through reform and renewal. Others descend into chaos. Which path they take depends on leadership, values, and whether people can rise above self-interest long enough to rebuild common ground. The same principle applies to your personal economy. Internal conflict within yourself is what sabotages most financial plans. You want security, but you also want freedom. You want to save, but you also want to enjoy. You want to be patient, but you crave instant results. These contradictions mirror national ones. If you can align your internal goals, if you can build a system that balances discipline with flexibility, you become your own stable empire. You stop fighting yourself, and your productivity compounds. Inflation is one of the most misunderstood forces in economics, yet it's incredibly simple once you grasp its cause and effect. Inflation happens when the amount of money grows faster than the amount of things to buy. When governments print or borrow excessively, when credit expands faster than productivity, prices rise. It's not an opinion, it's math. Inflation is a form of hidden taxation. It transfers wealth from savers to borrowers, from the cautious to the leveraged. Historically, inflation has been both the result and the remedy of too much debt. When you can't pay debts in real terms, you devalue them through cheaper currency. It's how nations quietly default. In the early stages of inflation, it feels like prosperity. People have more money, spending increases, businesses boom. But as prices rise faster than incomes, the illusion fades. Those who understand what's happening protect themselves. They own real assets, land, commodities, productive companies, skills that hold value regardless of currency. Those who don't understand it watch their savings melt silently. Inflation punishes ignorance and rewards understanding. That's why financial literacy isn't a luxury, it's survival. Debt crises are simply the hangovers after the inflationary parties. They follow predictable steps. First comes expansion, credit grows, optimism rises, borrowing feels safe. Then comes the topping out, debts accumulate faster than income, and growth slows. Next comes the downturn, borrowers can't pay, lenders tighten, default spread. Finally comes the deleveraging, either through austerity, restructuring, or printing money. The last option, printing, is the most politically convenient, which is why it's the most common. But it's also the most dangerous long-term. It buys time at the cost of trust. When trust in money erodes, people look for alternatives: gold, other currencies, real assets, even cryptocurrencies. These aren't fads, they're survival instincts. Throughout history, when empires printed too much, citizens found new stores of value. The Dutch moved to silver and land, the British to foreign investments, and modern investors diversify globally. The principle never changes. Trust shifts to where discipline resides. When one nation loses financial integrity, another gains it. Understanding these dynamics allows you to play offense, not defense. You don't need to fear inflation or debt if you understand them. You can use inflation to your advantage by borrowing at fixed rates to acquire appreciating assets. You can use deflation to your advantage by holding liquidity when others are desperate to sell. Every cycle offers a mirror image of risk and opportunity. The trick is to see both sides simultaneously. Innovation is the counterforce to decline. It's the reset button of civilizations. When a society faces stagnation, the only sustainable escape is productivity growth, and productivity grows through creativity. The Renaissance followed the Black Death. America's Industrial Revolution followed a century of turmoil. China's resurgence followed decades of reform. Innovation is the phoenix that rises from the ashes of crisis. The same holds true for individuals. When your life hits a downturn financially, emotionally, professionally, the way out isn't comfort or denial. It's creation. You must invent your next chapter. In my own career, I've seen innovation rescue entire industries. In the 1980s, computerization transformed finance. In the 1990s, the internet democratized information. In the 2000s, globalization lifted billions out of poverty. Now we face another transformation through artificial intelligence and digital systems. Every wave of innovation creates winners and losers, not because technology cares, but because adaptability does. Those who cling to old ways fight the tide. Those who learn to surf it build empires on the foam. Innovation is also emotional. It requires courage to destroy your own comfort zone before reality does it for you. Nations that innovate institutionalize curiosity. They invest in education, reward risk-taking, and allow failure without shame. Individuals who innovate do the same within themselves. They ask new questions, explore uncomfortable ideas, and treat mistakes as tuition. The more complex the world becomes, the more valuable this mindset becomes. Because in complexity, those who can't learn become dependent. Those who can learn become free. So, if you look back at history's greatest recoveries, you'll notice a pattern. Pain leads to reflection, reflection leads to reform, reform leads to renaissance. The pain is unavoidable. The reflection is optional. The societies that use pain as a teacher rather than a trigger for blame come out stronger. The same is true for your financial life. Losing money, making bad investments, misjudging opportunities, all of it is pain. But pain is not the enemy. It's feedback. It's information. When you study your mistakes with honesty, you extract principles. Those principles become your compass. That compass guides you through the next storm. One principle that has saved me countless times is simple but profound. Expect surprises. The biggest risks are the ones you don't see coming. History's turning points always catch the majority off guard because they expect the future to look like the past. But reality doesn't care about comfort zones. The Roman citizens couldn't imagine life without their empire. The British couldn't imagine losing their colonies. Investors in 2006 couldn't imagine the housing market collapsing. The people who thrive aren't those who predict the exact event. They're those who design systems that can survive anything. Flexibility is the antidote to surprise. You gain that flexibility through diversification and humility. Diversification protects you from being wrong. Humility helps you realize you could be. Every time I thought I had the answer, the market reminded me otherwise. Every time I assumed this time is different, I paid a price. The truth is, human nature never changes. We repeat the same emotional mistakes generation after generation. Greed, fear, overconfidence, they're constants. The tools change, the psychology doesn't. The only way to rise above it is through principles. Principles act as guardrails for emotion. That's why I built my life and my business on principles that don't depend on luck or prediction. I call them my unchanging truths. Things like, don't bet too much on any one thing. I plus reflection equals progress. The greatest mistake investors make is believing that what happened in the recent past will continue. The most important thing is to know how to deal with what you don't know. These are not clever sayings. They are distilled experience, and they work not just in finance, but in life. If you live by principles that align with reality, you can weather any environment. The changing world order we're living through now is testing every system, economic, political, and personal. Inflation is testing discipline. Debt is testing honesty. Inequality is testing unity. Technology is testing adaptability. But these tests are also invitations to evolve, to learn, to rebuild on firmer ground. The people and nations that pass these tests will define the next century. The rest will fade into footnotes. When I talk about financial freedom, I don't mean yachts or luxury. I mean independence from fear. True wealth is the ability to act based on reason, not desperation. It's knowing that no matter what happens to currencies or governments or markets, you'll be okay because you understand the mechanics beneath them. You've studied the patterns. You've built buffers. You've aligned with reality. That's what financial peace feels like. Not the absence of volatility, but mastery over it. You see, history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. Inflation, debt, conflict, innovation, they're verses in the same eternal song. If you learn the melody, you can improvise within it. You can anticipate the next chord. Most people only hear the noise of the moment. They react to headlines. But if you step back and listen deeply, you'll hear the rhythm underneath. The rhythm of rise and fall, boom and bust, learning and forgetting. That rhythm is predictable enough to build your future upon. So, as we navigate this stage of the cycle, rising debt, rising inflation, rising conflict, remember, this too is a phase, not a fate. Don't be paralyzed by the noise. Focus on what endures: productivity, integrity, adaptability, balance. Those are the timeless assets. Everything else is temporary. The world will keep changing. Empires will keep rotating, technologies will keep rewriting rules, but the principles of thriving within change remain constant. Study history, learn its cause and effect, and apply it to your own life. Because the same forces that shape nations shape you. The same cycles that create fortunes for countries can create freedom for individuals. All you need is awareness, discipline, and the courage to act when others are afraid. That's how you stay not just afloat, but ahead in the changing world order, by understanding that the order is always changing, and that your greatest asset is the ability to change with it. Every empire eventually faces a moment when its greatest enemy is not outside its borders, but inside them. The seeds of decline are always planted during times of prosperity. Wealth brings comfort, comfort brings complacency, and complacency opens the door to division. When a society stops rewarding productivity and starts rewarding entitlement, when ideology replaces practicality, when emotion overrules logic, decline accelerates. It's not new. It's as old as civilization itself. And it happens the same way in families, companies, and individuals. Internal conflict is the gravitational pull that drags down even the strongest systems unless it's counterbalanced by shared purpose. History shows that nations fall not because of one dramatic collapse, but because of a gradual erosion of unity. When people lose sight of what binds them, when they see each other as enemies instead of partners, productivity slows. Instead of creating, they start fighting over how to divide what already exists. The pie stops growing, and everyone ends up poor. You can see this dynamic in every declining empire, from ancient Rome to modern superpowers. In the late stages of the cycle, polarization intensifies. The gap between rich and poor widens, trust in institutions fades, and populism, both left and right, rises. It's not about ideology, it's about pain. People feel the system isn't working for them, and they seek someone to blame. When pain and frustration reach a certain level, politics stops being about solving problems and becomes about scoring points. Reason gives way to resentment. The middle disappears. And when the middle disappears, compromise dies. In those moments, societies stand on a knife's edge. Some rediscover unity through reform and renewal. Others descend into chaos. Which path they take depends on leadership, values, and whether people can rise above self-interest long enough to rebuild common ground. The same principle applies to your personal economy. Internal conflict within yourself is what sabotages most financial plans. Oh, I want security, but you also want freedom. You want to save, but you also want to enjoy. You want to be patient, but you crave instant results. These contradictions mirror national ones. If you can align your internal goals, if you can build a system that balances discipline with flexibility, you become your own stable empire. You stop fighting yourself and your productivity compound. Inflation is one of the most misunderstood forces in economics, yet it's incredibly simple once you grasp its cause and effect. Inflation happens when the amount of money grows faster than the amount of things to buy. When governments print or borrow excessively, when credit expands faster than productivity, prices rise. It's not an opinion, it's math. Inflation is a form of hidden taxation. It transfers wealth from savers to borrowers, from the cautious to the leveraged. Historically, inflation has been both the result and the remedy of too much debt. When you can't pay debts in real terms, you devalue them through cheaper currency. It's how nations quietly default. In the early stages of inflation, it feels like prosperity. People have more money, spending increases, businesses boom. But as prices rise faster than incomes, the illusion fades. Those who understand what's happening protect themselves. They own real assets, land, commodities, productive companies, skills that hold value regardless of currency. Those who don't understand it watch their savings melt silently. Inflation punishes ignorance and rewards understanding. That's why financial literacy isn't a luxury, it's survival. Debt crises are simply the hangovers after the inflationary parties. They follow predictable steps. First comes expansion. Credit grows, optimism rises, borrowing feels safe. Then comes the topping out. Debts accumulate faster than income and growth slows. Next comes the downturn. Borrowers can't pay, lenders tighten, defaults spread. Finally comes the deleveraging, either through austerity, restructuring, or printing money. The last option, printing, is the most politically convenient, which is why it's the most common. But it's also the most dangerous long-term. It buys time at the cost of trust. When trust in money erodes, people look for alternatives: gold, other currencies, real assets, even cryptocurrencies. These aren't fads, they're survival instincts. Throughout history, when empires printed too much, citizens found new stores of value. The Dutch moved to silver and land. The British to foreign investments and modern investors diversify globally. The principle never changes. Trust shifts to where discipline resides. When one nation loses financial integrity, another gains it. Gains. Understanding these dynamics allows you to play offense, not defense. You don't need to fear inflation or debt if you understand them. You can use inflation to your advantage by borrowing at fixed rates to acquire appreciating assets. You can use deflation to your advantage by holding liquidity when others are desperate to sell. Every cycle offers a mirror image of risk and opportunity. The trick is to see both sides simultaneously. Innovation is the counterforce to decline. It's the reset button of civilizations. When a society faces stagnation, the only sustainable escape is productivity growth, and productivity grows through creativity. The Renaissance followed the Black Death. America's Industrial Revolution followed a century of turmoil. China's resurgence followed decades of reform. Innovation is the phoenix that rises from the ashes of crisis. The same holds true for individuals. When your life hits a downturn financially, emotionally, professionally, the way out isn't comfort or denial, it's creation. You must invent your next chapter. In my own career, I've seen innovation rescue entire industries. In the 1980s, computerization transformed finance. In the 1990s, the internet democratized information. In the 2000s, globalization lifted billions out of poverty. Now we face another transformation through artificial intelligence and digital systems. Every wave of innovation creates winners and losers, not because technology cares, but because adaptability does. Those who cling to old ways fight the tide. Those who learn to surf it build empires on the foam. Innovation is also emotional. It requires courage to destroy your own comfort zone before reality does it for you. Nations that innovate institutionalize curiosity. They invest in education, reward risk-taking, and allow failure without shame. Individuals who innovate do the same within themselves. They ask new questions, explore uncomfortable ideas, and treat mistakes as tuition. The more complex the world becomes, the more valuable this mindset becomes. Because in complexity, those who can't learn become dependent. Those who can learn become If you look back at history's greatest recoveries, you'll notice a pattern. Pain leads to reflection, leads to reform, reform leads to renaissance. The pain is unavoidable. The reflection is optional. The societies that use pain as a teacher rather than a trigger for blame come out stronger. The same is true for your financial life. Losing money, making bad investments, misjudging opportunities, all of it is pain. But pain is not the enemy, it's feedback, it's information. When you study your mistakes with honesty, you extract principles. Those principles become your compass. That compass guides you through the next storm. One principle that has saved me countless times is simple but profound. Expect surprises. The biggest risks are the ones you don't see coming. History's turning points always catch the majority off guard because they expect the future to look like the past. But reality doesn't care about comfort zones. The Roman citizens couldn't imagine life without their empire. The British couldn't imagine losing their colonies. Investors in 2006 couldn't imagine the housing market collapsing. The people who thrive aren't those who predict the exact event. They're those who design systems that can survive anything. Flexibility is the antidote to surprise. You gain that flexibility through diversification and humility. Diversification protects you from being wrong. Humility helps you realize you could be. Every time I thought I had the answer, the market reminded me otherwise. Every time I assumed this time is different, I paid a price. The truth is, human nature never changed. We repeat the same emotional mistakes generation after generation. Greed, fear, overconfidence, they're constants. The tools change, the psychology doesn't. The only way to rise above it is through principles. Principles act as guardrails for emotion. That's why I built my life and my business on principles that don't depend on luck or prediction. I call them my unchanging truths. Things like, don't bet too much on any one thing. Pain plus reflection equals progress. The greatest mistake investors make is believing that what happened in the recent past will continue. The most important thing is to know how to deal with what you don't know. These are not clever sayings. They are distilled experience, and they work not just in finance, but in life. If you live by principles that align with reality, you can weather any environment. The changing world order we're living through now is testing every system, economic, political, and personal. Inflation is testing discipline. Debt is testing honesty. Inequality is testing unity. Technology is testing adaptability. But these tests are also invitations to evolve, to learn, to rebuild on firmer ground. The people and nations that pass these tests will define the next century. The rest will fade into footnotes. When I talk about financial freedom, I don't mean yachts or luxury. I mean independence from fear. True wealth is the ability to act based on reason, not desperation. It's knowing that no matter what happens to currencies or governments or markets, you'll be okay because you understand the mechanics beneath them. You've studied the patterns, you've built buffers, you've aligned with reality. That's what financial peace feels like. Not the absence of volatility, but mastery over it. You see, history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. Inflation, debt, conflict, innovation, they're verses in the same eternal song. If you learn the melody, you can improvise within it. You can anticipate the next chord. Most people only hear the noise of the moment. They react to headlines. But if you step back and listen deeply, you'll hear the rhythm underneath. The rhythm of rise and fall, boom and bust, learning and forgetting. That rhythm is predictable enough to build your future upon. So as we navigate this stage of the cycle, rising debt, rising inflation, rising conflict, remember, this too is a phase, not a fate. Don't be paralyzed by the noise. Focus on what endures: productivity, integrity, adaptability, balance. Those are the timeless assets. Everything else is temporary. The world will keep changing. Empires will keep rotating. Technologies will keep rewriting rules. But the principles of thriving within change remain constant. Study history, learn its cause and effect, and apply it to your own life. Because the same forces that shape nations shape you, the same cycles that create fortunes for countries can create freedom for individuals. All you need is awareness, discipline, and the courage to act when others are afraid. That's how you stay not just afloat but ahead in the changing world order, by understanding that the order is always changing and that your greatest asset is the ability to change with it. When I study history, I'm not just looking at maps and charts. I'm looking at human nature repeating itself on a grand scale. Empires are people, just organized into systems. They're built by imagination, sustained by discipline, and destroyed by arrogance. The same emotional cycles that drive a market cycle, greed, denial, also drive the rise and fall of world powers. Once you understand that connection, the big picture stops feeling abstract. It becomes personal. You can see your own behavior reflected in the behavior of nations. Every empire has a life cycle. It's as predictable as the seasons. First comes the birth, an era of ingenuity, hard work, and unity. People are poor but hopeful, motivated to build. Then comes the golden age. Productivity surges, trade flourishes, innovation accelerates. Wealth expands faster than population. Confidence grows. The nation's currency becomes trusted around the world. It's the era of stability, prestige, and pride. But pride quietly invites decline. Debt accumulates. Luxury replaces thrift. Citizens grow entitled. Political division increases. Productivity stagnates. Eventually, the nation begins living off its past success, borrowing from the future to maintain the illusion of strength. Finally, it weakens under its own weight, and power shifts to a new rising competitor. The baton passes, as it always has. Money and credit are the lifeblood of that process. The currency of a dominant empire becomes the world's reserve because everyone trusts it as a store of value and a medium of exchange. The Dutch guilder, the British pound, and the US dollar each held that position in turn. Having the reserve currency is a blessing at first. It allows the nation to borrow cheaply and finance global influence. But it's also a curse. Easy money encourages excess. Imports grow faster than exports. Debts pile up. The same advantage that once built the empire becomes the trap that destroys it. It's the paradox of privilege. What makes you powerful also makes you complacent. Right now, we're in the late stages of the American empire's long-term debt cycle. The dollar remains dominant, but its foundation is weakening. The United States still leads in innovation, technology, and military power, yet it's burdened by debt levels that would have terrified past generations. The wealth gap is wide. Trust in institutions is fragile and politics have become tribal. Meanwhile, a new challenger, China, has risen with massive productivity, expanding trade networks, and a growing technological edge. None of this means America will collapse or China will dominate overnight. It means we're living through the handoff phase when one power declines gradually while another rises steadily. These transitions take decades, but they always end the same way. The world order changes. It's important to understand that this isn't about morality or ideology, it's about mechanics. A currency becomes dominant when a nation is the largest trader, lender, and innovator. It loses that dominance when it becomes the largest debtor. Power follows productivity. Whoever produces the most and saves the most eventually controls the rules of the game. That's not politics. That's arithmetic. So if you want to know where the world is headed, don't watch speeches. Watch balance sheets. China's rise is often misunderstood in the West. It's not just an economic phenomenon, it's a return to the historical norm. For most of the last 2,000 years, China and India together produced more than half of the world's GDP. The last few centuries of Western dominance were the exception, not the rule. The pendulum is swinging back not as a zero-sum game, but as a rebalancing of global influence. The world is becoming multipolar again, and in a multipolar world, resilience comes from diversification. That's the first lesson individuals can learn from global transitions. Don't anchor your future to a single system. Just as nations diversify alliances and resources to remain strong, you must diversify your income streams, investments, and skills. No single currency, market, or employer should hold your destiny. The most secure empires in history weren't those that resisted change. They were those that hedged against it. The same applies to you. Financial independence is geopolitical independence on a personal scale. It's freedom from the fragility of one system. Throughout history, the decline of one empire has always coincided with opportunities for individuals who understood the new direction of flow. The British investors who embraced the rise of America thrived as the pound faded. The American entrepreneurs who recognized Asia's manufacturing boom became global giants. Change destroys those who deny it, but enriches those who align with it. The key is not guessing which nation will lead next, but understanding the timeless principles that determine leadership. Productivity, saving, education, adaptability. Those are the currencies that never devalue. Let's look deeper at the mechanics of money, because that's where most people lose their footing. Money is not wealth. It's a claim on wealth. Real wealth is the ability to produce goods and services that others value. When a government creates more money than it creates productivity, each unit of money buys less. Printing money can disguise problems for a while. It can even make people feel richer. But it doesn't change reality. You can't print prosperity. You can only print claims on prosperity. And when those claims exceed what exists, someone eventually pays, either through inflation, taxes, or default. It's one of history's oldest lessons, yet one each generation has to relearn the hard way. When trust in a currency erodes, global capital migrates to safer stores of value. That's why gold, real estate, and strong foreign assets rise in price during monetary crises. It's not because they change, it's because confidence shifts. The same psychology that drives people out of a weak currency drives investors out of weak companies and individuals out of weak financial positions. Strength attracts trust. Weakness repels it. So the question becomes, how do you make yourself strong enough to be trusted by the market, by partners, by time itself? The answer, again, lies in productivity and discipline. Nations that maintain strong education systems, technological innovation, and fiscal prudence retain power even as global conditions shift. Individuals who maintain those same traits, constant learning, innovation in their own work, and disciplined saving, retain financial power even when markets crash. You can't control world events, but you can control your response to them. And your response determines your freedom. The US dollar will eventually share its dominance, just as the British pound did. That doesn't mean collapse. It means coexistence. Reserve status rarely vanishes overnight. It erodes as global confidence diversifies. We may move toward a world of multiple major currencies. The dollar, the euro, the yuan, perhaps even digital or commodity-backed units. For investors, that means opportunity. A world with multiple power centers offers multiple sources of return, but it also demands awareness. The blind loyalty that once worked, just hold dollars, adjust by U.S. assets, no longer guarantees safety. The new advantage belongs to those who think globally but act pragmatically. Another crucial dynamic in power shifts is debt. Empires fall when debt outgrows income. The more debt a government accumulates, the more it must print to pay interest, and the more inflation erodes trust in its currency. It's a feedback loop that eventually resets through painful adjustment. Historically, that adjustment comes through either restructuring, reducing what's owed, or through war, which resets power structures entirely. The same happens in personal finance. People who borrow excessively eventually lose freedom. People who maintain manageable debt levels gain flexibility. The lesson echoes across scales. Control your leverage or your leverage will control you. When I look at the modern world, I see a paradox. We have more information than ever, yet less wisdom. We have more technology, yet less patience. The systems that should empower us often overwhelm us. That's why principles matter more than predictions. Predictions fail when the world surprises you. Principles work precisely because they hold under surprise. One of my guiding principles is simple. Build systems that survive what you can't predict. That's how you thrive through transitions, whether it's a changing empire or a volatile market. Resilient systems share three qualities: diversity, balance, and transparency. Diversity spreads risk. Balance maintains stability. Transparency ensures feedback. The same qualities that make a strong portfolio make a strong nation and a strong individual. That's no coincidence. They're all expressions of the same universal law. Reality rewards equilibrium. Extremes, whether of ideology, leverage, or emotion, inevitably self-correct through pain. Moderation, on the other hand, compounds quietly and powerfully. Innovation will remain the deciding factor in global leadership. Every empire that sustained itself beyond expectation did so through reinvention. Britain's decline slowed because it adapted its financial system and global influence even after losing its colonies. The U.S. still leads the world in innovation because of its culture of entrepreneurship and creative freedom. China's rise has been driven by a relentless focus on education, infrastructure, and long-term planning. The pattern is clear. Whoever invests most effectively in the future wins it. And that same logic applies to your personal economy. The best investment is always the one that compounds knowledge, health, and adaptability. Financial freedom is not about beating the system. It's about understanding it deeply enough to stop being surprised by it. When you know how global capital moves, how currencies lose value, how governments react to crises, you stop reacting emotionally. You act strategically. You stop fearing inflation because you know how to hedge it. You stop fearing recessions because you know how to stay liquid and buy opportunity. You stop fearing change because you realize it's the source of all progress. That mindset is the ultimate wealth. A changing world order doesn't have to mean chaos. It can mean transformation, if you're prepared. The same way an old forest must burn for new growth to emerge. Outdated systems must collapse to make way for renewal. The fall of one order always seeds the birth of another. The key is to position yourself as the seed, not the ash. When the next monetary system emerges, whether it's digital, decentralized, or multipolar, the principles won't change. Productivity will still matter more than politics. Saving will still matter more than spending. Learning will still matter more than complaining. The variables evolve. The fundamentals remain eternal. That's why understanding cause and effect at the deepest level gives you power no empire can take away. So as we move through this transition, keep perspective. Empires rise and fall, currencies strengthen and weaken, markets boom and bust. But the people who observe carefully, learn continuously, and act prudently always come out ahead. They are the quiet winners of history. They are the builders of the next order. And every one of us has the chance to be one of them, because the changing world order isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you can navigate, influence, and benefit from. The laws of cause and effect don't favor the powerful, they favor the prepared. If you align your life, your finances, and your mind with those laws, you become unshakable in any system. That ultimately is what freedom means. Not the absence of change, but the mastery of it. Technology has always been the quiet hand guiding the rhythm of history. Every great leap in human progress has been born from an invention that changed how people produce, communicate, and think. The plow transformed tribes into civilizations, the printing press turned ignorance into education, the steam engine powered empires, and the microchip created the digital world we live in today. Each of these shifts rewired the balance of power. Each time, those who adapted early rose with the tide, and those who resisted were swept aside. When I study the patterns of nations and markets, I see technology not as an external force, but as the expression of human creativity itself. The impulse to make life more efficient, more productive, more free. Technology amplifies everything that already exists. It multiplies productivity, but it also multiplies mistakes. It accelerates progress, and it accelerates inequality. That dual nature is why every technological revolution has created both prosperity and disruption. The Industrial Revolution created enormous wealth, but also immense social tension. The digital revolution connected billions but fractured attention and trust. Now, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and energy transformation are redefining the playing field again. None of these forces care about ideology, they care about efficiency. They reward adaptability and punish complacency. The challenge for nations and individuals alike is to harness technology as a servant without becoming its slave. When an empire leads in technology, it leads in everything else. The Dutch built the most advanced ships and ruled global trade. The British mastered machinery and ruled industry. The Americans mastered information and rule finance and innovation. The next dominant power will master integration, the ability to merge data, energy, and human intelligence into coordinated productivity. We are entering an age where knowledge, not territory, is the true measure of strength. Those who manage information wisely will design the next world order. But technology alone is never enough. It must be guided by principles and leadership. I've seen brilliant systems collapse because they lacked integrity. A computer can optimize. Only a human can prioritize. Leadership in this new era will not come from command, but from clarity, the ability to see reality as it is and align people around it. The best leaders are not those who shout the loudest. They're the ones who understand cause and effect and communicate it simply. In moments of confusion, clarity is the highest form of power. Leadership begins with self-leadership. If you can't manage your own emotions, you can't manage complexity. The world will always throw surprises at you. Market crashes, political shifts, technological disruptions. The untrained mind interprets every surprise as danger. The trained mind sees it as data. When you learn to respond with analysis instead of anxiety, you become the calm center in the storm. That calmness is contagious. It builds trust, and trust is the foundation of leadership at every scale, from the family to the empire. Adaptability is the essential human technology. You can lose a job, a business, a currency, even a country, but if you retain the ability to learn, you'll rebuild. Every major transformation in history has rewarded learners. The British merchants who learned finance after losing colonies became the bankers of the world. The Japanese engineers who rebuilt after war became global innovators. The individuals who treat every change as a classroom will always find opportunity. The only people who truly fail are those who stop learning. I often say that evolution is the single most powerful force in existence. Everything in the universe evolves toward greater complexity or it disappears. In economics, evolution means creative destruction, new ideas replacing old ones. In personal life, it means replacing outdated beliefs with better ones. The moment you cling to what used to work, you begin to decline. That's why humility is more valuable than intelligence. Intelligence can help you solve problems, but humility allows you to recognize new ones. The combination creates wisdom. Look at how technology is reshaping the balance of productivity. Automation is eliminating routine labor while increasing output. Artificial intelligence can now perform tasks once reserved for highly educated professionals. This shift is as significant as the mechanization of agriculture. Millions of people will need to redefine what value means in their work. For societies, this requires massive reinvestment in education and lifelong learning. For individuals, it requires the courage to reinvent themselves repeatedly. Financial freedom in the New World Order will belong to those who build adaptable minds, not rigid careers. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is pattern recognition. Machines process data. Humans perceive meaning. The investor who sees the emotional cycle behind the numbers. The entrepreneur who sees the human behavior behind the algorithm. These are the people who will thrive. Technology may replace tasks, but it can't replace understanding. Understanding is the ultimate competitive advantage. As innovation accelerates, so does the pace of change in wealth distribution. The people who control new technologies accumulate extraordinary returns, while others struggle to keep up. This widening gap mirrors the late stages of every empire. When wealth concentrates too narrowly, social harmony breaks down. The solution isn't to halt innovation, it's to broaden participation. The societies that endure are those that make opportunity accessible. Education, transparency, and fair systems of credit are the social technologies that keep revolutions peaceful and progress continuous. On a personal level, the same logic applies. If your wealth depends entirely on a system you don't understand, you are vulnerable. If your income depends on a single employer or market, you are exposed. Diversify not just your assets, but your abilities. Learn how money works, how policy works, how technology works. Knowledge diversification is the new diversification. The more angles you can see, the less likely you are to be blindsided. Another principle, combine logic with empathy. Pure logic can build machines, only empathy can build civilization. In business and investing, empathy means seeing the world through other people's incentives. It means understanding that markets move because people move. Every chart, every transaction, every price fluctuation represents human emotion aggregated. The more accurately you can model that emotion, the more precisely you can predict behavior. The same insight applies to leadership. Influence begins with understanding what others need and connecting it to what is true. The rise of new technologies will also reshape money itself. Digital currencies, programmable assets, and decentralized finance are not science fiction. They are the next evolution of exchange. Just as paper replaced metal and credit replaced cash, code will replace paper. Governments will adapt, markets will adapt, so must you. The core principle remains unchanged. Real value comes from productivity, not promises. Digital systems will make transactions faster, but they won't eliminate the need for discipline. Whether money is printed or coded, its worth still depends on trust. Trust is built by transparency and results. That's why I believe the future will reward radical honesty even more than technology. Information travels too quickly to hide incompetence or deceit. Reputation compounds like interest. Every interaction either builds or depletes your trust capital. In an age of constant exposure, character is the ultimate currency. Innovation also changes how nations compete. In the old world order, power came from armies and territory. In the new one, it comes from data and networks. Cybersecurity, intellectual property, and digital infrastructure have replaced battleships as the front lines of conflict. Yet the same principle still applies. Whoever controls the flow of resources, physical or digital, controls destiny. That's why I tell investors to understand systems, not just stocks. The internet is a new kind of geography. Data routes are the new trade routes. Protecting your information is now as important as protecting your capital. We are living through the fastest convergence of technology and humanity in history. It can feel overwhelming, but it's also the greatest opportunity any generation has ever had. When the pace of change is exponential, even small improvements compound enormously. One insight, one skill, one disciplined habit adopted now can translate into freedom decades later. The best way to predict the future is to design your behavior according to principles that never expire. Learn relentlessly, diversify broadly, save consistently, act ethically. The tools may change, those rules do not. The relationship between technology and freedom is paradoxical. The same tools that liberate can also control. Data can empower creativity or invade privacy. Algorithms can expand opportunity or amplify bias. Each of us must choose how we engage with these systems. Use technology consciously, not compulsively. Make it serve your goals instead of shaping them. Remember that convenience can be a subtle form of captivity. Every empire that lost its edge began by outsourcing its effort. Don't outsource your thinking. Leadership in the New World Order will belong to those who combine technical literacy with moral clarity. Knowing how to build systems is half the battle. Knowing why you're building them is the other half. Purpose scales faster than profit. The most resilient institutions of the next century will be those that operate on principle. Profit will follow trust as it always has. A society that rewards integrity outlasts one that rewards manipulation. The same is true for individuals. Character is a long-term asset. Speculation is a short-term gamble. To remain free in the age of automation, cultivate the qualities that machines can't replicate: curiosity, creativity, compassion, courage. Those four are the human capital that will never depreciate. Curiosity keeps you learning. Creativity keeps you valuable. Compassion keeps you connected. Courage keeps you acting when others freeze. Master those and no algorithm can replace you. If there's one thing I've learned from decades of studying cycles, it's that the line between crisis and opportunity is thin. Every collapse plants the seed of its own recovery. Every invention that threatens old jobs creates new ones elsewhere. The key is to stay awake, to see the long arc instead of the short shock. The people who thrive in the next world order will not be the strongest or the richest. They will be the most aware. Financial freedom in this context means more than accumulating capital. It means cultivating independence of thought. The herd will always panic at change. The disciplined thinker will see patterns instead of noise. Build your life so that your stability depends on principles, not predictions. Then no crash, no policy, no revolution can take your freedom away. Technology may change the landscape, but it doesn't change human nature. Behind every code and circuit lies the same ancient pursuit: to survive, to create, to connect, to improve. The systems we build reflect our inner state. If we build them with fear, they will enslave us. If we build them with wisdom, they will elevate us. The next world order will be shaped not just by technology itself, but by the consciousness of those who wield it. So, learn the tools, but never worship them. Use data, but remember the story behind it. Invest in systems, but invest even more in people. Progress without principle is just speed without direction. Principle turns speed into purpose. That's the path to wealth that endures, nations that last, and individuals who stay free, no matter how much the world changes.